Okay, so we're going to start today Daf Tzadik Zayin Amud Beis. But we will go back to the end of Tzadik Zayin Amud Aleph. Just about 4 lines from the bottom of the Amud, Tanu Rabbanan. Okay, so basically we're going to be discussing throwing from a Rishus Harabim into a different Rishus Harabim, and it goes through a Rishus Hayachid. So until now we spoke about throwing from or passing from a Rishus Hayachid to another Rishus Hayachid, going through a Rishus Harabim, which that is a typical case of Havara passing. That was the way it was in time in the Mishkan, where they used to pass the beams from one wagon to another wagon. So passing from a Rishus Hayachid to another Rishus Hayachid, traversing a Rishus Harabim in a way of passing, that undisputably is a of Malacha. The question would be about Zayrik. Throwing is questionable if we're learning it out from Moshit or not. Moshit is passing. That's exactly the way you used to do it in the Mishkan. You used to pass one beam of wood to another, from one wagon to another wagon. They would not be able to throw it because it's too heavy or because it wasn't respectful. But so for sure that's the of Malacha, from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Hayachid with the Rishus Harabim in the middle. The question is, how about throwing? How about now we're going to discuss it the opposite way. Rather from Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Hayachid to Rishus Harabim in the middle, it's Rishus Harabim to another Rishus Harabim with the Rishus Hayachid in the middle. So just to introduce another important point, and that is that we just learned before a couple of them earlier that there is a Av Melacha and there's a Tolda. The Av Melacha is Hitza'ah, and the Tolda is Hachnasa. Although they seem exactly the same, but taking out of your Rishus is the Av, and bringing into your Rishus is the Tolda. Why is that? Because in the Mishkan, that's where it used to be. We had in the Moshe Rabbeinu asking people to bring things for donations for the Mishkan. So people would bring the donations from their house to the Mishkan, to Machne Leviah, where Moshe Rabbeinu was. So we're assuming that Moshe Rabbeinu was in Machne Leviah, which was a Rishus Harabim, and the people brought it from their house, which is a Rishus Hayachid. So they did Hitza'ah from their Rishus Hayachid, bring it into Rishus Harabim. So the Hitza'ah taking out, that is the Av Melacha, because that is exactly the typical the way it was in the Mishkan. That's what the Gemara established beforehand. That which was in the Mishkan is going to be considered the Av Melacha. That which is not exactly in the Mishkan, that would be a Tolda. So over here, we're going to be discussing passing from the Rishus Harabim into another Rishus Harabim, traversing the area of a Rishus Hayachid in the middle. Seemingly, he has done 2 melachos. Number one, he's transferred it from the Rishus Harabim into the Rishus Hayachid, number one. And then the Rishus Hayachid into the Rishus Harabim. So seemingly he's done over here the Av and the Tolda. The Hitza'ah from his Rishus into the middle section of the Rishus Hayachid. And then he's done a Hachnasa from the middle Rishus Hayachid into the second Rishus Harabim over there. So this is a case where you have an Av and you have a Tolda. And the whole Amud is going to be playing around this concept of an Av and a Tolda. Av and a Tolda, when you have the two coming together at once. So a person did by mistake something, an action, which entailed within that one action, the Av and the Tolda. And there's going to be, throughout the Amud, 3 situations, different situations, discussing this scenario of having an Av and a Tolda being carried out within this one action. And the discussion would be, is the person chayiv only on the Av, or is he also chayiv on the Tolda as well? In other words, is there two karbonos he's going to have to bring? Obviously, talking about a case where he did it b'shoigig, he did it by mistake, and therefore he has to bring a carbon chatos. So the question is he chayiv on just one? Is he chayiv just on one melacha of the av, and the tolda is sort of carried away within the av and is insignificant, or no? Each one has got its chashivah. So this is going to be the main discussion, which is going to be carrying itself out over three different halachas. So this is going to be the first one. Let's do it inside of it. Tana Rabbanon, not in the Braisa. Meshus harabim meshus rabim meshus yachad be'emtza. The person threw an object from Rishus Rabim to Rishus Rabim, and there is a Rishus Hayachid in the middle. Rabbi Mechayiv, Rabbi is Mechayiv him. We will see on what. And Chachamim are saying he's pot. So, what is Rabbi Mechayiv? What is Chachamim Peitin? So, seemingly, Rabbi is going to be Mechayiv on the taking out of his Rishus into the Rishus Yochid, and then again from the Rishus Yochid into the Rishus Rabim. So Rav and Shmuel, Rav and Shmuel, they're both saying, Lo Chayiv Rabbi Ela B'Rishus Yochid Mekirah. That which Rabbi is being Mechayiv on taking out from his property, from the Rishus Rabim into the Rishus Yochid, was not said only when the house is, the Rishus Yochid has a roof over it. The Amrina basic command the Maliyah told me that we're saying that the house is as if it is full. The Rishus Yochid with the roof on it is dark, and we consider the whole area space of inside the Rishus Yochid to be full, and therefore anything that traverses space is as if it landed on the Rishus Yochid. So you have a akira from Rishus Rabim into Rishus Yochid, you have a hanacha, and then you have again, as it continues its travel from the Rishus Yochid into the second Rishus Rabim, you have another akira and another hanacha, and therefore you move on to a hachnasa. Therefore, that's why he's chayiv on the hitzah and the hachnasa. If there's no roof on it, we do not say that as if it landed into the rishus hayachid, and therefore we just consider it as if it's traversing straight through and going from rishus rabim to rishus rabim. Rabbi would actually, in this case of having landed, of going through the rishus hayachid, would be chayiv too. Achas mishum hitzah, but achas mishum hachnasa. One is because of the av melacha of hitzah from the rishus rabim into rishus yachid, and the second one from the hachnasa from the rishus rabim, bringing it into the rishus yachid, the second into the second one, and therefore he would be chayiv on the hachnasa. Yosef Rav Chana was sitting and he had a question to him. Rabbi, I told him, are you suggesting now that Rabbi is chayiv because of a tolda in a place of a of? In other words, he's chayiv on two, but also because of the hitzah, and also because of the hachnasa. Rabbi says in the pasuk, Devarim had Eila had Devarim ve'elu shloshim v'teisha melachis shenam leMoshe miSinai. We have the pasuk that says, Eila had Devarim. We're talking about the things which are not asked to be done in Shabbos, and we're learning at Joshua that number one, Eila is the gematria of 36. Lamed is 30, Hey is 5, Aleph is 1, which is 36, and then we have the extras of Hadavarim, because it could have said Davar. So what does it say instead? It says Devarim, the plural. So now we're up to 38. Then we have the extra Hey of Hadavarim, takes us to 39. These are the 39 melachos. There's no more and no less. A person can, and why is he telling us these numbers? Teach us that any person, the maximum amount of chiyuvim a person could ever have by not being aware of what he's doing on Shabbos is 39. It's not possible to have any more than that, and therefore it must be that there's only the 39 that is chayiv and not the toldos. Because if you would be chayiv on the obvious and the toldos, it could be that we chayiv on more than 39. So that's the limit of the number 39 come to teach us, that is only chayiv on those 39, and if there were to be any other issues involved, he will not be chayiv on them. In other words, he's only chayiv on the obvious, he's not chayiv because of the toldos that are coming along together with these obvious. Whenever you have the av, it's just the av which is there. We ignore the tolda. He's not chayiv because of the tolda. So here we have Rabbi clearly saying that a person is not chayiv because of a tolda when there's an av. So you can't say that Rabbi has just now said that throwing from Shus Rabbin, traversing Shus Yochid, going to the next Shus Rabbin, is chayiv also in the Hitzah, which is an av, and also because of the Hachnasa, which is a tolda. You learned it regarding to this case. You learned this din of Rav Yehuda Mashmur that a person is chayiv on a tolda in the place of the av on Rebbe's din of throwing Shusam to Shus Rabbin. And that's why you had your difficulty with Rebbe. Contradiction in Rebbe. But we learned this saying of Yehuda Mashmur that a person is chayiv on a tolda in the place of the av. We learned it on a case of Rabbi Yehuda. Not on Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, but different Rabbi Yehuda. But no cash, and therefore there's no difficulty. The Tanya, because we're not in the Bryce, Mishus Hayochel Shus Rabbin, Vova Abba Amis B'Shus Harabin. Rabbi Yehuda Chayiv, V'Chacham Pritch. If a person threw an object from Shus Yochel to Shus Rabbin, and it passed over 4 Amos going into the Shus Rabbin, so Rabbi Yehuda holds his Chayiv, and the Chachamim saying he's pot. So what happened over here? He threw it from his Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbin, and didn't just land at the very beginning of the Shus Rabbin. It traversed 4 Amos into the Shus Rabbin. So seemingly he could be chayiv on 2 things. So he's done number 1, the issue of throwing from his Shus Yochid into Shus Rabbin. He's done a hitzah, and he's done another issue of passing over, traversing 4 Amos in the Shus Rabbin, which is a separate issue, which we learned in the previous Amudim, is the halacha mishum misinai. The issue of actually just walking in the Shus Rabbin 4 Amos. You haven't done any hitzah, you haven't done any achna, so you're just in the public domain walking 4 Amos. So why are you chayiv? No, so the Gemara comes to the conclusion it's halacha mishum misinai. But nevertheless, that halacha mishum misinai is a tolda. It's not a av. It's a tolda. And he was assuming that Rabbi Yehuda is saying you're chayiv both because of the hitzah from the Rosh Hashanah to Rosh Rabbin, and also because of this tolda of Havarer Dalad Amos in the Rosh Rabbin, traversing 4 Amos in the Rosh Rabbin as a separate issue, and therefore Rabbi Yehuda Mashmur Rabbi Yehuda, it was first making this person chayiv to achas mishum hitzah from throwing from Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbin, achas mishum Havarer for the extra 4 Amos of it traversing in the air within that Shus Rabbin. So here we see clearly that Rabbi Yehuda is holding that you have a tolda b'mokim av, and the person is chayiv on the av, and because of the tolda. So we've moved away from Rabbi being the person who was suggested to have been saying this halacha of that person chayiv tolda b'mokim av. That was refuted. It can't be the case because of Eila Devarim. There's only 39, no more, not toldas involved. Can ever be chayiv because the toldas involved when you got the others. And we're moving on saying, no, it's not Rabbi, it's Rabbi Yehuda. And when did Rabbi Yehuda say this halacha? In this case over here, throwing for Shus Yochid and Shus Rabbin and traversing 4 Amos, where you have the hitzah and the havara of 4 Amos. The Gemara is now going to push us away as well and say, actually, this is not necessarily the only understanding one can have in this brisa. It can also be understood that indeed one is actually only chayiv 1. Rather than saying it's chayiv because of the hitzah and the havara of the 4 Amos, it could actually be that he is chayiv only because of the hitzah, not because of the extra 4 Amos. But let's before that, the Gemara is going to finish off its proof, and in trying to understand this brisa as saying that it must be that he's chayiv, that Rabbi Yehuda is suggesting he's chayiv too on the av and the tolda. If you're suggesting that Rabbi Yehuda is only saying that one is chayiv 1, and then Chacham is saying is patur completely, that must mean that if you're going to say that it's only chayiv 1, then when Rabbanan say patur, what do you mean patur? It goes down a level to nothing. How can you say Rabbi Yehuda is saying completely potter? If you're going to say that Rabbi Yehuda is saying chayiv 2, then Chacham saying potter, it means he's only chayiv 1. I can understand. He did instead of saying that on the second stage of the 4 amas in the Shus Rabbim, he's only chayiv on throwing it from the Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbim. But if you're going to say that he's only chayiv on the hitzah from the Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbim, and then Rabban is going to say potter, nothing at all. What do you mean? There's no suggestion of it being potter. There's no way of getting out of the fact that he has done a hitzah over here. On the extra 4 amas, it's debatable. Is it included in the first throwing? Not the first throwing, I can understand. But to suggest that Chacham will say potter completely, that's impossible. He's done a hitzah from his rishus into Shus Rabbim. There's no way of getting away from. So that's the Gemara suggesting to say that must be that Rabbi Yehuda is saying 2, and the Chacham at least saying he's chayiv on the 1. It's impossible to think Chacham was saying completely nothing. So then based on this understanding now, Rabbi Yehuda is holding his chayiv 2 on the av of the hitzah, and the tolda of the havar of Daled Amos, the continuation of the traveling of 4 amos in that Rishus Rabbim. And the Chacham is suggesting no, he's only chayiv on the hitzah, not on the extra 4 amos, because it's a tolda. And it comes out that Rabbi Yehuda is holding a person as chayiv on the av and the tolda, which is going on at the same due to the same action. So now the Gemara is going to suggest that actually no, there could be that the Chacham is saying completely exempt. How can you have a situation of being completely exempt? You're throwing from Shus Yochid into Shus Rabbim. There's no way of getting out of that. So the Gemara is going to come with a very interesting scenario of understanding this, that a person could be completely exempt. How do you know that's the only understanding? It could actually be that the person is that Rabbi Chacham are suggesting is completely exempt, and Rabbi is suggesting is only chayiv of the hitzah. Yehuda is holding he's only chayiv 1. Rabbanon potri legamri, and Rabbanon are suggesting he's completely exempt. How's it? And how is it possible such a situation? Going to Omar, for example, that he said, "Ad nafkelei l'rishus harabim tanuach." He in his mind suggested that he wanted in his mind that it should land as soon as it exits his Rishus Yochid and goes into the area of the Rishus Rabbim. And it didn't, as we know. It didn't land at the very first point of the Rishus Rabbim, rather it continued flying another 4 amas. But nevertheless, this is we're going to argue about B'Hokam Ifligi. Rabbi Yehuda Savam Rinan Kluto Kama Shehuncha. This Avida Le Machshavti. Rabbi Yehuda is going to hold that he's chayiv that when as soon as it entered into the area of the Shus into the area of the Shus Harabim. Why? Because behold the Kluto Kama Shehuncha. Kluto Kama Shehuncha. As soon as it enters a land space, an airspace of the Shus Harabim, it's as if it's placed on the ground of the Shus Harabim. And in other words, there's a hanacha. Rabbanon Savri, and one hold lo yamrin klutu kama shehuncha, v'lo yisavid le nachshavti. His intention was not achieved. So, in other words, they're discussing whether one is actually chayiv on hitzah from the Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbim or completely exempt. Why would the person? Why the Chacham suggesting he's exempt? Because it never landed where he intended to. A person is only chayiv on Shabbos when the action he did was fulfilled. He intended to do something, and his intention was achieved. Over here, by throwing it from the Shus Yochid to Shus Rabbim, and he wanted it to land at the very first spot. If you're going to hold at the very first spot of the airspace, it's as if it landed. You're going to hold that of such a concept, which you call Kluta Kamei Shehuncha, then you're going to hold Chayiv. The Chachamim that are not going to hold of such a concept, they're going to hold his potter completely because as far as he's concerned, his action was not achieved. His intention was not achieved. And therefore he's completely exempt. And therefore, indeed, the Gemara has now achieved its objective of suggesting a different explanation in this brisa of throwing from the Rishus Yachid into Rishus Rabbim, and it's transversing 4 Amos. The Gemara thought that it must be that Rabbi Yehuda is holding Chayiv 2, and the Chacham are suggesting he's only Chayiv 1. He's Chayiv of the Hitzah and of the Havara. That would be Rabbi Yehuda, and the Chacham are holding he's only Chayiv on the Hitzah. The Gemara is suggesting that no, he's only Chayiv on the Hitzah, and because of and that's for sure he's not Chayiv on the extra 2. On 2. He's only Chayiv, the debate is only Chayiv on 1. It comes out that we do not have Rabbi Yehuda necessarily holding that you have a Chiyuv of a Tolda b'Mokim Ha'av in this case, because they can explain it that Rabbi Yehuda is not holding that he's Chayiv of the Tolda b'Mokim Ha'av. Rather, he can explain, he's arguing whether he's even Chayiv on the Av in itself, in this case, of the actual Hitzah. Okay, so that's the second brisa, second discussion of whether we have the concept of Tod b'Mokim Ha'av, the Chiyuv of Tod b'Mokim Ha'av or not. Now we're going to go on to a third discussion, third brisa, that will be also discussing whether we understanding that there's a Chiyuv of Tod b'Mokim Ha'av or not. No sakadaito. Do not think like this. The Tanya learned in the Brayse, Rabbi Yehuda Moisif af hashovet v'medagdig. Rabbi Yehuda is adding also shovet and medagdig. So these are concepts which are related to the weaving process, which one of the Lamates Melachas. That the weaving process there is setting up the waft, I think it's called, and the warp. One is the vertical strings, and then you have the horizontal strings. First, they would set up the vertical strings, and then they would pass through a horizontal weaving string that goes through it. Those are 2 av melachas, and then you have under each stage of setting up the vertical and the horizontal, you have a amendment which makes each one of them to be done properly. So Shevet is making sure that the vertical strings are established well and not mixing in with each other. Each string has its space; they're not intermingling with each other. And Medagdeg is after having pushed through the weft, the strings that go horizontally, one knocks it and to keep each one in place. So Rabbi Yehuda, that time written in Rabbi Yehuda Moisif Afa Shevet v'Hamedagdig. Rabbi Yehuda is adding also Shevet and Medagdig as to be included in the original melachas of establishing the straight strings and the vertical strings. So they said to him, the Chacham said to him, how can you say that each one is a separate melacha? It's included in the main av melacha of Meisech and Oirig. The Shevet is part of the Meisech, and the Medagdik is part of the Oirig. How can you say that they're taking on its own identity? My love, are you not suggesting that it's talking about Davdinu letavayu bahadi adodi? In a case where somebody has done both of them together, he's done the Meisech, he's put up the straight strings, and then he's done the Shevet, separating them, and he's done the Oirig, he's put the horizontal strings going through them, and then he's been medagdig, but he's been medagdig by knocking it to separate them again. And what's Rabbi Yehuda suggesting? That he's chayiv in both of them. So here we see that Rabbi Yehuda, in this case, is for sure adding on these 2, in addition to the av melachos. So here we clearly see that Rabbi Yehuda is being mechayiv on a tolda b'mokim av. So if Yehuda in this brisa is clearly being mechayiv on a tolda in the same case in a situation where he's done the av, and so too in this previous brisa that we just learned about throwing from the Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabbim. So you got Hitzah, the Av Melach, and then it continued and traversed another 4 amas, and you have and therefore you have another Melacha, which is a tolda of Havaras Dalad Amas Shus Rabbim, passing from Shus Rabbim. And if in this case over here of the weaving, we're saying you have a tolda and Mokim Av, and the Yehuda is chayiv in both of them. We don't say that the tolda is nullified by the Av. So too in that previous case of Hitzah and the Havara, the correct way of learning that brayso would be that Rabbi Yehuda would be holding the chayiv both of the Hitzah and the Havara, the Av and the tolda. So in other words, we take a second brayso and the first brayso of Rabbi Yehuda was open for interpretation. It was debatable how to learn it correctly. So Gemara suggests maybe the way you're learning it is not absolute, the only way of learning it. Maybe Rabbi Yehuda actually is not holding the Tolda Mokim Av. So we bring the second brayso now of the weaving, where there's only one way of learning it, seemingly, that Rabbi Yehuda Mechayiv Tolda Mokim Av, and therefore we understand that previous brayso of the throwing and the traversing farmers also must be understood in that same way as Mechayiv Tolda Mokim Av. Now the Gemara is going to say that even that second brayso of the weaving is not absolute. That's also open for interpretation. That could be understood that Rabbi Yehuda is not being mechayiv on the Torah of Mokim Av. The Gemara is going to give a second alternative way of understanding it. Mimai, how do you know that must be that case is chayiv Torah Mokim Av? Dilma la'olam the Av do maybe in truth he's talking about he did them separately. He did the Av and he did the Torah. Rabbi Yehuda told them Mokim Av lo mechayiv, and Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold that he's chayiv in the Torah when there's the Av. So also Rabbi Yehuda is suggesting that you chayiv on the shevet and medakdik, which are the Torahs. Well, how come ifrigly? It's simple. The Yehuda Savahani obviously no. Rabbi Yehuda simply holds that these extra things of straightening the strings and banging them after the weft has gone through, they are indeed, those are obvious. Rabbanan Savahani told us none of that, and the Rabbanan are going to hold that they are told this. So there's not necessarily arguing about obvious and told this. If you chayiv on the told them, rather arguing whether they themselves are obvious or not. And now the Gemara is going to actually bring a proof to this way of understanding it. Teda, I'll give you a proof. The Katani, because the Brisa says clearly, Rabbi Yehuda Moisef. Rabbi Yehuda adds shevet to medakdik. So you have the original melachos of Mesech and Oirig, and then the Brisa said Rabbi Yehuda's Moisef is adding shevet to medakdik. So if you're going to say Rabbi Yehuda is adding avos on which is on the same level as the Mesech and the Oirig, my Moisef, what do you mean by adding? Moisef avos is adding on the same level of avos. If you're going to say that Yehuda is adding is putting forward here told those, my Moisef is not adding. You know, adding is an addition on the same level, not adding on a lower level. So therefore, it's more reasonable to suggest that Rabbi Yehuda is putting forward here Mesech and Oirig as being obvious melachos, suggesting we've got 41 obvious melachos, rather than suggesting these to be told us and making a chayiv on them as an addition to the obvious of the Mesech and the Oirig of the establishing of the strings. So here again, this brayso now has been learned in a way that not necessarily is Rabbi Yehuda being mechayiv on the Torah in the Mokim Ha'av. And that reflects back onto the previous brayso as well, of the throwing from the Rishus Yochid Shus Ram, traversing 4 amas, that necessarily is not going to be understood also as being chayiv on the Torah b'Mokim Ha'av. Now, Itmar Ami, we also learned in as follows. Rabbi and Yosef, indeed, Rabbi and Yosef have also taken on this understanding that Rabbi Yehuda when it's only chayiv on one. The only chayiv on the av and and not chayiv on the tolda. He's not chayiv on the additional 4 amos. The object traverse in Shus Rabim is only chayiv on, which is a tolda, is only chayiv on the av of throwing it out from the Shus Yochid into Shus Rabim. So now that's pretty much that discussion of the av mokim tolda. That the Gemara seems to be more inclined to say that a person that Rabbi Yehuda is not chayiv on a tolda when there's an av. Okay. Now, Omar le Ravina Ravash. When I the solig atatin mikaro the mechayiv hay Rabbi Yehuda shtayim. That which we had originally thought that Rabbi Yehuda was chayiv 2, making person chayiv 2, one on the hitzah, and then again because of the extra 4 amos. But 1 second, what's the logic of understanding that? If he intended that it should land at the very point that it entered into the Rishus Harabim, then he did not want that it should land at the next 4 amos. So he's got no reason to be chayiv on the extra 4 amos because he didn't want that to happen. If he wanted to land 4 amos into the Rishus Harabim, then he didn't want it to land at the beginning of the Rishus Harabim, and therefore he shouldn't be chayiv on that original first landing. So how could it be possible to make the person chayiv on 2 of from the Rishus Harabim 1? Then in the Rishus Harabim itself, extra 4 amos, he was only interested in one of those landings. If he's only interested in one of those landings, you can't be chayiv in both of them because his mind was not intending for that. And the person not chayiv and thinks that he wasn't intending. So Amalei. So Rav Ashi said back to Ravina, he's talking about in a case where he said that wherever that it will land, that's where it will land. And therefore he was completely open-minded about it. If it will land over here, then it's okay. If it lands over here, it's okay. And therefore, in that case, wherever it lands, even if it lands in both of them, which we are suggesting here that it should be landed, it's as if it's landing in both of them, he would be chayiv. And therefore, that was the way the Gemara understood it. That would be a way of understanding the possibility that he could be chayiv both on the hitzah and then again on the extra 4 amos. So we'll stop over here for this Amud. So just a very brief summary. The Gemara has now moved on to talk about passing over from a Rishus Harabim into another Rishus Harabim with a Rishus Yochid in the middle. And the based on that brayso, the Gemara is going to lead on to a discussion of Av and a Tolda being done as a result of the one action. And the discussion is whether the person is chayiv only on the Av and the Tolda is insignificant, it's included within the Tolda, included within the Av, or no, the person is chayiv on the Av as well as on the Tolda. And in the case of passing over from Shus Ram to another Shus Rabim, the Shus Yochid in the middle, that would be a hitzah from the Shus Rabim into the Shus Yochid, which we said has got a roof over it, and therefore if it's full, and therefore it's got as if it landed in that Shus Yochid, which hitzah is an av melacha. And then going from the Shus Yochid into the second Shus Rabim is a hachnasa, which is a tolda, and that would be the discussion: is he chayiv just on the hitzah into the Shus Yochid, or also from the second stage from the Shus Yochid into the Shus Rabim, which the Gemara suggested that was Rabbi who is putting forward this understanding. And the Gemara says it cannot be Rabbi, because we know Rabbi clearly does not hold that a person is chayiv of a tolda in a place of a av, because of Eila Hadvarim, that a person can only be chayiv on 39, never anymore, at one given time. And if you be chayiv on Tod Mokim Av, then it would be a situation of being at one given time chayiv more than 39. So for sure we know that Rabbi does not hold of Tolda the Mokim Av, the person is chayiv on both of them. But then the Gemara goes into another whole long discussion, maybe Rabbi Yehuda holds of it. And on that the Gemara brings down two brises within of Rabbi Yehuda discussing one halacha of passing from Rishus Hayochin to Rishus Rabbim and traversing 4 Amos into Rishus Rabbim, and another halacha of in the halachas of weaving, where each one of them there's two ways of understanding the brisa, whether one is only chayiv on the av or one is chayiv and also because of the tolda. And the Gemara concludes that must be the correct understanding of both of those brises is that he's only chayiv on the av and not because of the tolda.